Okay, you'll need a wooden board, a Prima transfer. I used DIY paint by Debbie's Design Diary. Sandpaper, 120 grit is perfectly fine. Some handles. And this one's a liquid top coat, Big Top by Debbie's Design Diary. And you could also use wax if you don't want to use a liquid top coat, and of course a paintbrush. So the first thing you're going to want to do is sand down any rough edges. This is a raw pine wood 18-inch board. So I go through and see where all the rough edges are. I have a Lazy Susan that I use to help spin the board a little bit easier. You don't need that. I just happen to have one on hand. So just go through and rub through your sandpaper all across until it's pretty smooth. So once I'm done sanding the board, I'll just take my hands and remove any particles that may have come up from sanding. The next thing you're going to do is take your paint and start brushing. I will go against the grain with my paint just to fill in any holes or divots in the wood, and then I'll go back and then feather out paint with the grain to get a smooth finish. Once I've completed painting, I'm going to let my paint dry. If I'm using DIY paint, I tend to let that dry overnight. I found that my transfer will adhere better. So now I'm going to take my transfer and take it out of the package. You get a burnishing tool, which is that kind of looks like a tongue depressor from the doctor's office. I will open up my transfer and remove the sheets. Generally, they come in 2 or 3 sheets. And now I'm going to lay out my sheets and pick out what area of the transfer I want to use for my tray. So now I'm going to take a pen and outline the board underneath so that I can use it to cut out the transfer. So when cutting out the transfer, I go just a little bit wider, maybe about 1/4 inch of the outline that I did. So now I'm going to apply the transfer. Transfers are sticky. They're kind of like a tattoo paper. You don't want to get dust on them or make contact with it. So I will hover my transfer over to make sure that it's lined up before I press down. Once it's stuck, you can't lift it up. So I always like to hover over and then place it on my project. So now I'm going to take my tool and rub the transfer onto my project. I'm going to be careful to get around the edges and small corners and just go through and make sure that everything is rubbed on. You don't need a lot of pressure. Okay, so now I'm ready to lift the plastic away and have the image transfer onto my project. I take one corner and slowly lift. Sometimes you'll find that pieces of the transfer will stick to the top. So just make sure that I have my tool ready to rub any pieces that might start to lift, and continue that process until it's completely transferred. So now we're going to match up a seam. So what I do, peel away, again, not touching my image on the other side, and hover over. This can get a little tricky, but just if you hold on to the edge and hover over till you get the lines matched up. If you're nervous about the transfer sticking completely, you could take the other backing and push it onto your underneath. And now that our image is on our project, we're going to carefully burnish, which is a fancy word for rubbing. You want to be careful on the edges. It's very easy to accidentally lift your image up if it didn't adhere completely, so use care when burnishing. Once everything is smooth onto your project, you now can go ahead and top coat. So I'm using a liquid top coat, Big Top by Debbie's Design Diary, and a brush by Paint Pixie, the synthetic, and I just literally paint on a very thin coat of the liquid top coat along my project. I go one way and then back to pick up any excess, brushing the opposite direction, making sure to get an even coat all the way across. So once your top coat is dry, I am ready to attach the handles. I just center them on the board, and I use a drill to attach the screws onto the board. And now your tray is complete and ready for use in your home. You can purchase any of the products shown at rubbishrestyled.com, and if you stay to the end, there is a bonus on using wax versus liquid top coat. If you're using wax, I'm using the backside of the original board, but you can certainly use wax over a transfer with a wax brush or a brush. You just use a little bit of the wax. I'm using DIY's Debbie Design Diary wax on your brush, and you just basically paint the wax onto your project all the way across. So once I have the wax on, I will go through with a small soft cloth and wipe off any chunks or excess wax on my board, and then I will just let it dry overnight. You can leave it as is if you want a matte finish, or you can take your soft cloth the next day and buff out the board, and then that'll give you a really nice soft sheen. And then wax takes about 30 days to cure. So if you're going to add items onto the top of the board, I would be a little careful and just wait the 30 days, and then it is completely hardened and then good to go for other use.